the king and those folks. We saw that, and then they learned that. I'm not sure that's taking place today with.
And part of it too is also, it seems like not only you have people that are speaking out, right? Like people like Calla Walsh, where they speak out and basically are going against our own, whether it be government, our people, our public officials and leaders.
But I think there's a lot of self-promotion, self-interest. It's not about the cause. It's about them.
It could be. It could be the case. I mean, considering the fact that when she actually pled guilty to back in November 2024, the incident I was talking about in New Hampshire, where like her and about a few other pro-Palestinian activists end up vandalizing, a business up there. And so it makes you think, right, when you have people speaking out like that, so much so against our own country, with good and bad, right? But still, in terms of countries, the United States of America is one of the ones where we have the most freedoms and rights and abilities to do, there's
but we're losing those. That's the point that I'm trying to get hit this morning, is that who's fighting for those for us to continue, because we're starting to see those eroding. Because the irony is that, even when you hear Donald Trump talking about part of the reason why he went into Iran was because they were killing people in the street for peacefully protesting. And we're having that here in Minnesota and other parts of the country. Matter of fact, just learned this morning that one of our Haitian brothers had passed away in ICE custody, who was taken for here in Boston, who had a medical issue and wasn't treated, and he just passed away. They were interviewing his family this morning. So are we trending towards what we claim we were fighting against, and that people's rights, that any opposition will be shut down, and we don't have a government that is actually working for the people? In my opinion, now it's working. It's Trump enterprise. But I'm just wondering, is that a caller or is that?
It is a caller.
Oh, okay. Let's grab this call. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable. Thank you for patiently waiting.
I don't know. Can hear you.
Oh no, peace, brother Jamal. I was just hanging on because the broadcast hadn't come on the interwebs.
Okay.
As of yet.
All right.
But yeah, in addition to the Haitian brother who died in that ICE custody out there in Arizona, from a toothache, of course. So I'm assuming he died of like sepsis or whatever happened. Right. But then also too, they just indicted the guy who the bus driver who hit that kid.
They did. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
And I'm still unsure. It's been almost a whole year now. I'm unsure how that guy was not in jail that day, particularly. But now, as you know, him just being indicted, he's still free while he's waiting for trial.
Right. So Jamal, very interesting points there, because I was just saying is that, are we losing freedoms here in this country? I believe we are. And I feel there's a vacuum of leadership, of developing new people to come into the roles of the Jesse Jacksons. Like, these are perfect people. We all know that. But they definitely have a track record of fighting for civil rights. And I just see a lot of performative things with politicians today, but no real action, no real call to action, just to help them get reelected, but not really help the people they claim they.
And you can see that, right? Where, like, even looking at our local politics, right, where you have our city council, whether it be city council and all the different city councilors and the way that they have been, just looking at the recent, election of how they named the chairperson, or even just how the city has been, right? Everything's becoming so either against Trump or that's it. Like, there's no, and they don't tell you as to, there are some campaigns out there that their whole campaign slogan is basically F Trump. But they don't show, well, what it is that they're there for. What are they there to do for the people? And then even when it comes to rights and so forth, right? You look at, part of it is that it gets so lost in these bipartisan politics versus actually having something like legitimate that they're actually talking about, substantive, right?
Well,
having some substance to what they're there for,
right? It's almost
what they stand for,
right? Jamal, they're looking for a slogan, something that will trend rather than something that will work. We're in this era of, what are we going to get the most likes on, right? Rather than to get the most help to people. I mean,
well, you remember old school Saturday Night Live. with my guy Billy Crystal when he's playing that character Fernando, and he said, it is better to look good than to feel good. And a lot of people are just going off of the appearance, and that's why the Facebook and the Twitter and all this stuff. So if you look good there, it doesn't really matter how damaged you are in real life, or how poisonous your ideas may be, as long as they're trending. Because for every idea, whether it's good or bad, you can get 1 million people to follow that idea.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are going for that affirmation.
Right. So I want to bring Brother Rhodes into the conversation. I believe he's on the line as well, because he is a Haitian brother, and just want to get his take on what has happened with our Haitian brother who was taken here out of Boston by ICE and has passed away, because we're hearing about the lack of humanity in these facilities, that people are not being given the basic service. Because when you take someone, I know, from being former law enforcement as well as Helen, once you bring them in, you have care and custody. That is the primary for you to make sure that it is not punishment. And if they need medical attention, it has to be provided. And the fact that someone is talking about a toothache, and we know there's not probably a dentist on site, but to not get people this, and someone dies from an infection like that, and not to be treated like humanity, because in some folks' mind, they don't believe people are human. And, we just saw recently, and it's all, like Trump just fired Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, only because she was spending more time with promoting herself than she was promoting him. It wasn't because of the policies and practices that were going on. So, Rose, I want to get your take on what on this situation.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And first of all, I do feel for that family, and unfortunately, that it's again a casualty of war, and that's what I feel like we're at right now. It's like the democracy is being threatened, and the fact that the president, keeps claiming that keeps claiming all these false narratives that have been proven to be, completely untrue and fabricated to maintain his power. It's like, I feel like the whole reason we're in this war is, again, just to distract from what's going on with the Epstein files. But, but to actually dip into what you're saying about what's going on as far as humanity goes, no, that's just been part of the MO for America. It's like, if you're not a white male land-owning person, you didn't even matter when it came down to the Constitution being written. So, of course, like even they've done studies where doctors have perceived that black people can't feel pain because they don't have empathy for a human being saying, "Oh, I'm hurting," but he's black, he doesn't know what pain is, and then that's crazy that you can see someone in pain but be able to ignore their cries and dismiss it because you already have dismissed the person as a whole as a group.
Or that they're good.
Or not for nothing, Rhodes. That's also too. That's what I call like this myth of resiliency. Which is one of those terms that's been used so much, resilient. And you know what that means? Shut up, you could take more.
yeah, right. You have a tolerance for pain, right?
Exactly. And as black people, and particularly for a lot of black women, or women in general, it's kind of been that thing, you could take it, you could tolerate it. Yeah. And so the abuses keep piling on.
So to that point,
but you also notice. I was just going to harp on the point that Jamal made in regards to black women. We're in a first world country, but yet we have worse birth rate, death rate for black women in this country than third world countries.
Absolutely.
So obviously, you're safer going out to Mexico or Haiti. You'll live compared to giving birth to a child here in America, where it's supposedly the best hospitals in the world or the best technology.
Yeah.
But
well, it goes to that saying, they say, when white America catches cold, we get pneumonia, right? It's always worse for us. Even when COVID came around, right? We were dying at a larger alarm, and also getting access to the vaccine, right? I saw people coming in from would never come into the city of Boston and the Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, but because there was availability of vaccines there, but it wasn't getting into the people who it was intended to, until other folks from more affluent neighborhoods were able to get the jab before they do.
And so much of it seems to be like there needs to be a balance, right? Like we're going so much one way versus another. And even when we talk about, it's definitely sad to hear with regards to the pastor where he passed away from something that could have been remedied, like a toothache, right? Where he ended up dying of sepsis.
I think it goes even further than that. He was here legally. He should not even been in custody, right? Because if he was not in custody, he would have had access to going to take care of that.
And so my point being is that there's been so much of that one side versus the other that you get that humanity gets lost, right? Of where you have people that are working. It's not just some faceless entity. It's individual human beings, people that are working at these detention centers, right, that are working as officers.
But when it's pushed out at the top from the president that these are not humans.
But it's not an excuse to treat other people like
humans. It's not.
You still have a responsibility.
You do, but you're
as a person.
But when someone's telling your job is threatened, if you don't act this way, or you're hiring people who have that mentality, this is what you're going to get.
But it's still not an excuse, though. I still don't give them an excuse because you go back to the days of even like back when, if it didn't work in the Nuremberg trials with the Nazis in terms of saying that they were just following orders, it can't work with anyone else either.
It can't. But here's the problem today.
Whether it be ICE or whether it be any
we're talking about
law enforcement agency, police department, whatever it may be.
When people don't understand the history, like when I'm talking about Crispus Attucks, most people think it's a housing development in Roxbury. They don't understand that Crispus Attucks was a real person. A lot of the younger people today don't understand the history and why we're in where we are today and why we're going in reverse today. Jamal and then Rhodes. I know Rhodes. Jamal, you were saying, so we interrupt you. Go ahead, and I want to hear Rhodes, and we'll switch back.
No. I just wanted to say too. On like the issue of care and facilities, right?
Mm-hmm. Care and custody.
For anybody who's been locked up, whether it's over a weekend or a county jail for some months or actual prison, what have you. You can tell there's two elements. Whether the people actually have actual animosity and just like, hey, screw you, we're not helping you, right? Or complete lack of training. So unless you are falling down in full seizure and somebody's like, yo, this dude is, seizuring up and he's on the floor, he's, foaming at the mouth, there's not a level of emergency. So if you go complaining about a tooth, you're lucky if you get an aspirin.
Right.
Or people are going to treat it in such a way where it's just minimalized. Yeah. And based on the ICE people, I am pretty sure that they have less training than both police and correction officers.
Well, they're bringing people in within the magic number because of Trump is they're getting 47 days of training. And Helen and I both know, the police academy for me was 6 months, right? And it was Monday through Friday, and it was a lot in there. 47 days. I mean, you're not even getting the basis. Matter of fact, you could flunk out of the academy in 47 days. But I want to bring it home here because I want to bring Pastor Hobbs in this because it just brought something to mind. Is that there was a recent incident over at South Bay in which it was a gentleman that was that died in custody over at South. Was it South Bay or
South Bay?
Yeah, and so there's a lot of talk about that, right? So here's someone who was supposed to be in care and custody. Can you just enlighten our audience a little bit about where that is and just?
Yeah, so Shakobi Kenny was a gentleman whose life, unfortunately, was taken in custody, in care at the Suffolk County House of Correction.
Your mic's not on.
It actually is on.
Yeah, can you hear? Yeah, I can hear. Can you hear him? Okay, we can hear him.
All right, now I can hear him.
Okay.
Okay. So he was in custody, in care, and at the hands of correctional officers. People actually witnessed it and are traumatized, were moved from the unit. There's a bunch of folks who were actually, insisting that the correctional officers that did this have a history of violence and that they actually be put off the job. And so, we'll see what happens. I think that the Attorney General is actually investigating it.
Okay.
So this is a pattern of violence, murder, and sexual assault that is now,
prevalent, it seems to be.
And that goes back to, again, people can't hide behind organizations or even where were the other correctional officers, right? You mentioned about the correctional officers that knew of the ones that were responsible for Shakobi's death. With regards to knowing that they had a history, what were they still doing there working?
But I think
with
also,
prisoners with the other history.
It ties into also to your point there, right? When people are pushing like Jamal and others accountability at the Post and OPAT, right? And people are saying, hey, you know what? we have agencies here that are supposedly be tasked with addressing that, and there's been such pushback, and we've seen it out in the public where we've seen the OPAT, which is the version of the city's version of police accountability, really been stripped of any real power and weakened. And in the organization, the Pulse, which is a statewide, we've seen resistance from the police department to accountability.
Look at the way that even just if you look at the subpoenas, right? You have the subpoenas that were issued by OPAT, right, for Boston police officers to show up. Most of them didn't show up. I believe it was like, maybe a dozen or so that like were issued for subpoenas, and like only about maybe 3 or so, I think it was, just off the top of my head, that were actually responded to, right? So they have Boston police officers that are subpoenaed, and they're ignoring subpoenas. And then you even tie that back to, okay, is it part of that institutional culture that you're just talking about? Because even when we talk about ICE, right, with the ICE detention centers and even the ICE detainers that they issue out, right, you have the news of where Boston saying, Commissioner Cox is saying that, we only responded to, say, like, I think it was like, 60 something ICE detainers, but then yet you have ICE coming back and saying, oh no, it was like 100 and something detainers, right? So then you even have this almost escalation of, you have even a whole city police department that's not responding to ICE detainers. You have police officers that aren't responding to subpoenas. You have them going just one way versus another, and it can't work that way, right? You have people not following the rules, not following the laws, and doing it in a way where it's become very more political than it is actually just following the rules like they should be. And people like the pastor that passed away in Arizona, he shouldn't have been there. But then you have other people that are out there with, assaults and violent crimes and everything else on their records that should be detained and aren't. Right. So it becomes this political battle. So
this is, I'm glad that's great. Political. So Jamal, where do we go as far as, because this is being discussed quite a bit, but like here, where is the leadership weighing in on this? And not just that, but the community engagement, as I was saying earlier, is that there's a vacuum, it seems to be, of community leadership. Like we're not, I don't know who that person is today in the city. We in the past we could identify multiple people, the Pastor Walls, the Georgette Watson, the list goes on. I would include you in that conversation, right, with people who have leadership. But when I'm looking back at younger people that are coming in to replace and even support, I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, and clearly, I miss folks like Senator Owens and,
right.
Doris Bunty.
The Bowlings. These are not right.
And yeah, we're not recreating that level of genius or commitment. I mean, it's a lot of social factors going on, distractions and everything else. And it's really disturbing. And at one time too, in my own brain, I'm still a quote unquote youth activist, but the reality is I'm 55. Right, I'm already a member of AARP.
Right.
Well, and speaking of activists, you look at the people that are calling themselves activists nowadays, and like I mentioned earlier, and I don't know if it made it with the way that the internet, the webcast wasn't working as well. But even you have people like that Calla Walsh who calls herself an activist, where it was actually considered a terrorist attack that she pled down to, just making it like criminal trespass and criminal mischief or whatever it may be. But people like that call themselves activists, they get people together. They end up getting these people like Markey reelected, people like Wu elected into position. And then it makes you wonder with those political movements, right? And those people that are the ones that are backing these politicians into these positions, it makes you wonder how far can that influence go in terms of being a part of our being key figures in our government, right? Making those political decisions.
Right.
And then one moment. And then even with Christine Noem, right? She actually with that, they ended up removing her from her position, but she actually wasn't fired. He actually reassigned her to like another high position.
Well, it's a made-up position.
Yeah, so it's like
so she can continue to get her insurance.
Shifting her to a
that's the politics of it.
And then moving in, I think it's like another. I believe it was like it's a senator. I think it was
from
that
Nebraska who has no background
in the position, right?
and what he will be tasked with doing. But it's not about fixing the problem. It's just about the illusion of cruelty.
But see that trend, right? People that don't have the background going into these positions that are making these high level decisions that can have a huge impact on people.
Yeah.
Right. And then on top of that, it's like you look at we just had that conversation last week, right? With regards to the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee for City Council, that you have the chair and the vice chair of the council. Neither of them have that, public safety background. We talked about that, right? We're like having that impact on how the police department is with the community or whatever it may be.
To that point, though, that's exactly where I'm trying to get here, because there were some moves made yesterday, Jamal. And I'll let you finish your thoughts. Where you're saying in the Boston Police Department, in which there were 7 new captains promoted, all Caucasian, 2 white females, and it was based on the list. But what was interesting is that Captain Hussein, who was the only captain of color in any district station, was moved out of there and sent to the courts, right? Which is really a non-functioning. It's not really. You've got about maybe 6 or 7 people under you as a captain, compared to when he was running Area B2 as a captain, running the whole district there, right? That's a huge change. And now we have no representation. And this goes back to when, during the campaign of the first election for Mayor Wu, when we were pushing to have the deputies put back in charge of the station, not symbolically, so we have some representation. Because as it stands right now, you cannot go into a police station and see anyone that looks like any of us at this table running anything. So I finish your thoughts, Jamal, and I want to get your take on these changes here, because it's
okay. All right, so I'll start with the thoughts. So the thoughts were what we was talking about was the community activism and the loss of, or the vacuum of leadership. Right, and at the time, what Senator Owens put me on to, and Mr. Billy Sylvester, of course, was involved in this. Senator Owens told me, he said, Jamal, we created a pyramid of power, right, with the politician, the preacher, and the police. So Mr. Sylvester was the police.
But to that point, let me just interject and I'll let you finish. To that point, that's what I'm saying. That's where I learned my advocacy for officers of color, from people like Billy Sylvester, John Wells, and others, Paul Gaines. So go ahead. So you're connecting the dots for me, and go ahead.
Minister Dawn was the preacher, right? And Senator Owens was the politician.
Yeah.
And so there was a level of community activism that kind of went from not the trickle down, but the trickle up, from the community to grassroots, to actually making things into policy and whatnot. And I too learned from these people, which is why I've been active on these various forms of police reform and so on, and also to understanding it's a marathon, not a sprint. So while we got, the Boston Police Reform Task Force, and while we have post and all the results that have come from that, everything is still not working. All the engines are not fired up. But that hearing will be coming up quite soon in the Boston City Council. It has been referred, as we talked about last time, it has been referred to that committee. There is a date forthcoming, and as soon as that date comes, certainly we will announce it. And now, lastly, to your point of Captain Hussein, at least, because the other promotions or whatever, that's, it's par for the course. But the loss of Captain Hussein down Dudley, or Nubian, that's going to be a super blow, and I don't know if the merchants and the organizations in the area are aware, because he's been the most effective.
Right.
And I would love to hear from Siddiqui on this, because I think
he doesn't know. But Jamal, that's my point. I'm saying these things did not happen. I remember when they wanted to remove Billy Sylvester, who was the deputy superintendent at Area B, and there was an outrage. They knew they couldn't pull him out of that station, right? The community said no. They decided, this is my point. This is happening, and there's nothing, because people don't even know it's happening. You did not just remove people from these areas without the community's consent and at least their input.
And under Captain Hussein, there had been marketing, because you and I were both critics, and Nubians is still not perfect, but it certainly got better, increased patrols, increased activity, and whatnot. And now, in the absence of Captain Hussein, I predict cigarette sales will go up.
So you get your niggas. Pastor Hobbs had some comments he wanted to do.
Yeah, actually, so my comments were actually was expounding upon the oversight legislation for correctional officers. That's kind of akin to the post. So we've got what's happening on the city level, OPAT. We've got the post, and we should be learning from each of these iterations, right? Of how. So now with the correctional officers, that's this new piece of legislation that Senator Miranda has just wrote, and it's Senate 1723, Senate Bill 1546, and Senate 1724. They're three companion pieces of legislation that are creating oversight for correctional officers, and there is no certification, there is no oversight. So I just think that it's important, as we are doing these various pieces of oversight for various law enforcement, that people are mindful of this pieces of legislation that are pending on the state level for correctional officers.
Right. And so here's the issue, is that if we don't have oversight over the people we elect, then they will never, a lot of times the legislation, it sounds good, right? But we know what's its chance of success of actually being law, right?
Well, and remember, and we know in Massachusetts, the whole, whether it be corrections officers fall under our county, not even technically county, right? But our county sheriff's departments, and then how politically, entrenched those county departments have been, right, when it comes to the sheriff's departments, and then county correction in terms of like corrections officers, even though they technically work for the state, right? And then you talk about learning from OPAT and post. Look at what we've been seeing, where hopefully they learn from the fact that don't just give them, these powers where they can't do anything with them. Where you've had so many recommendations made from OPAT to the Boston Police Department that are completely ignored. We don't want the same thing happening with whatever this entity is going to be, in making recommendations to the corrections department and have it be completely ignored.
Jamal, how do we strengthen good?
Yeah, and I was going to say, and you said about elected officials, we do have to hold our elected officials accountable, because say even this situation with the new promotions with captains and someone like Haji being pushed out, that I'd say falls right back to Mayor Michelle Wu, because she's our elected official. But
does it fall? I understand and I get that, but I guess the deeper question, we've had this conversation numerous times. The community allows it. They always say you get the government you deserve, right? If the community is not, there's no backlash, and it's all usually from the same people, right? Because Jamal, were you aware of these changes?
No, this is the first I'm hearing that.
And that's what I'm talking about, right? And I know there are no, but normally this would not happen if they felt the community had a real strong voice, and there would be some backlash to doing this, right?
And look at where the changes were: East Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester, right? You also had West Roxbury, Jamaica Plain, and what was it? Roslindale, I think.
I guess the irony and the hypocrisy, right, was when Captain Kogovan, who was Captain Hussein replaced, right, who I thought was doing a fantastic job. The community loved him.
He was not a bad guy.
No, exactly, right. So, and the reason they say, the community wanted a person of color in that station, right?
Now they don't.
You take someone who the community was working with very well and had no objection to him being there, and now you take someone out who you claim you put in there because it looked more like the community
wanted him there,
and now you remove that person.
And then what's the unsaid message, right? If you put him in there saying that it's because the community wanted him there, so you take him out because unsaid that you're trying to say the community doesn't want him there? But then
not only do you take him out, but you put him in really a job that in charge of the courts, right? That is a job we all know.
There's no community interface there.
No, exactly.
The only thing I can say, Larry, Captain Hussein, God bless him, because he's been around for a while, and God knows he gave it the office. How long is he before retirement?
I'm gonna say a year or so. Not that long, but
so that would also too. I just I'm trying to find a rainbow in the rainy sky.
Well, here's the thing, Jamal. This is why I was pushing, right? Because we knew that there wasn't anyone on the bench to replace him that look like him. Why the mayor, and she just did a symbolic gesture with it, right? This is why there should be a push to put deputy superintendents back in charge of the district stations so that we have representation over the captains, regardless of what they look like, that we have a say in what goes on in our community by people that look like someone that's in charge of their community. So that's an easy fix.
Let me tell you this too, Larry. Hold on one second, please. Larry, let me just say this.
Yeah.
Also, to your point about how the community has kind of gotten desensitized or depoliticized or less involved. Also, we have to say this new generation of officers is less likely to get involved politically or be active in MAMLEO as well, or assert themselves
until they get in the jackpot.
In leadership.
Right, until they get in the jackpot. Yeah.
And I think as important as for someone to have not only just look like in the community, but have that experience too.
That's important.
With that level of, what it is that the community needs in terms of whether it be just having that degree of engagement, having had that experience of being able to know what the issues are in the area, in the community, right? Even ideally, if you could have someone who actually lives in that area or in that district so that they know what's going on a day-to-day basis and be able to connect with the community to a degree. That would be helpful.
It would,
right?
but I'm going to push back a little bit on that because I found that when I lived in the community and worked in the community, there was really no separation. Like, you need a break, So I think if you choose to, then that's all well and good. But even like now, the cost of living in Boston is astronomical. So to say it makes you more invested if you live there. I find I spend more time helping out the community now than I did when I was living here because I see, I'm in a better position to do so.
I mean, kind of like seeing it from a different perspective.
Well,
from coming from outside the city, coming
not
into the city.
feeling the stress of not having any separation. Like, if you've had a busy day in the neighborhood and you still live in that same
neighbors that will knock on your door,
right?
I had that.
And you come home and it's the same environment. You're like, it's overwhelming. So I feel like now I have a break where I can recharge my battery and not have to be dealing with that. But you're right, Jamal. There are a lot of people waking up this morning not knowing these changes that have taken place, and there was always consideration with our elected officials before making moves of this magnitude.
Or even something like similar to how some cities and towns will choose their police chiefs, for example, right? As many neighborhoods as we have in the city of Boston, and how the captain of a district station can have quite an impact on that neighborhood, right? What about having community forums or panels where you can have people that actually where they get to speak to the community gets to engage with them, get to talk to them, and kind of get to see who the people could be that could potentially, be captain of that district.
I think
just to get a chance to be able to see, because how else would they know who would be good?
But this is why the area commanders, like we had before, when Area B had a deputy, all the districts had a deputy. Is actually, if you look at the salaries that just came out, right, on what
you had
folks
people
are
earning over $450,000.
Deputies are on salary. So in a time when the city is looking to curb promoting captains is just blowing the budget out of the water. When deputies are salary, no matter how many hours they work, they don't get any extra money for doing it. So there's a cost savings to the city, but also there's an opportunity to have representation across the city.
But then when you're making almost $500,000 a year, I think in terms of whether it be cost savings or cost of living, even as expensive as Boston can get, it's still going to cushion the blow more than enough to.
But most police agencies have done away with the captain's positions because they don't see the value really in it, and they have deputies because they actually get them at a cheaper rate.
So you're saying that they used to have, instead of captains of the district, it was deputy
superintendents. Yeah, there were captains had been phased out. There was only, when I came on the job, there was only one captain, and he was at the courts, and they were phasing him out. It was deputy superintendents because it allowed the mayor at the time, I believe it was
to
Kevin White,
people,
right? And then because if a captain isn't functioning in the way you want, you just have to live with them. And you can only bury so many of them.
Civil service.
Right. But when the deputies aren't, you can either remove someone and replace them with someone else who you feel is going to do a better job for you.
But doesn't that have a lot of that political impact and influence in it too, right? Because
but you have
keep
it
in
anyway.
mind, we've had with the history with Boston, they've had history of a police officer going from patrol officer being appointed to command staff, right? Jumping all these levels and ranks. There is something to the fact of going through the
Helen, you have someone who has never been in elected office running the United States.
There you go.
So it's about ability, right? Because I don't think we lessen people's intellect, right? Because they don't have a title beside them, and we put people in these positions who can't function in them, and say, well, that's a better choice because they have rank
or have had no supervisory experience going up, right, moving up. Whereas you have people that at least going from patrol to sergeant and then moving all the way up through the ranks to captain. At least they've had to have, by just prerequisite of being in that position, they had to go through the ranks and had to have the supervisory experience.
I don't think it's because you think about it, most police officers supervise themselves and they do a better job. A lot of times when the supervisor comes on the scene is when things get screwed up. So
those are the not so good supervisors.
Right.
But you have good supervisors too.
No, I'm not saying you don't, but I'm saying I don't think that's the cure-all. But also I think when you have to look at this, when Rhodes has been quiet, is that you have two black male deputy superintendents, one former, one current, that is suing the police department. I think that tells you all you need to know about what's really going on inside.
I was going to try to chime in and say it again, like the community needs to rally behind these people, because when Eddie was ousted out of his position, there was some sort of like community kind of like outcry, but I didn't see it manifest into an actual like, hey, we want to, I didn't think the community spoke strong enough. Or maybe there was news coverage in regards to that.
It was for a few days.
But it's an appointed position, though. It's not a civil service rank. Like you mentioned, Larry, if he was a captain and they try to remove him, it's a different story than when you're in an appointed position of deputy superintendent.
Also, when you guys mentioned the fact that it's supposed to be a representative government, and the fact that the government goes out of its way not to represent us, but to represent special interests, like they never go and ask the people, hey, like you said, the Captain Hussein was there. But apparently the community wanted him, but they just go around and afterwards just change it without the community knowing. So they're not looking to get feedback or any kind of input from the community. They're just doing it without, without any regard for how the community feels or, so to me, it is like, again, they're operating without, us in mind.
Any accountability.
Afterthought as a people,
No, I agree. So, Jamal, I mean, I think folks are waking up this morning, and if they're not listening to this broadcast, they won't know until maybe they go looking for Captain Hussein and find out he's no longer there. And like you said, there is remedies for this, and they'll tell you, oh, well, they have a deputy that's a zone commander. And I'm going to be brutally honest with people. That zone commander is not in charge of the day-to-day operation of that station. It's a symbolic position to say that we have someone that maybe looks like that individual, but they're not running the station. That captain is running the station, and we don't have anyone. So right now, currently, from this last exam, there is no one, I believe, eligible, maybe one or two people, and we don't know if they're going to get to them, of color that can be promoted. So the only way to square this, and Mayor Wu knew this when she ran the first time, because we brought this as an issue and we backed her in the corner, because when she was having that forum up at Morning Star, and her opponent came out first and said that they would put the deputies back in charge of the station, and she agreed with it, and then she backpedaled it, and then she said, oh, we'll have these zone commanders, we'll give you symbolism, no substance. So she was on the record when Asabi George said that she was going to, because we had spoke to her, and she agreed that was the only way we're going to have representation. And particularly even now, we know historically that when women are made captains, they might get a command at the station for about 5 minutes, and then they're in charge of the details or something insignificant, just like the courts. I'm not saying it doesn't have a function, but you don't need a captain in charge of the courts. You just don't. You just don't. And that's usually the jobs that are designated when they want to bury someone, that they're not happy. Because Captain Hussein has always been outspoken in that sense, and because he's a civil service captain, the only thing you can do is move him around like a chess piece.
Well, kind of like where you tend to see when it came to, females in command staff, they would be moved to either, whether it be operations or the academy, like more what you think of as essentially administrative roles, right? Or administrative. You don't see a female superintendent or deputy superintendent managing Bureau of Field Services, where they're the ones that would manage patrol and operations, patrol operations in that sense, right? Where the bureaus that actually have more of a significant impact to the, not to say that one is more less than the other, but there is more significant impact when it comes to field services when that manages all of patrol, right? There's a difference there.
No, I was just going to say, and this is the reason why, again, this station is so important, right? To have these kinds of conversations consistently, because things are happening so rapidly. When we think about what happened with the president of the city council, right? That whole process, how it happened midnight, right? The night before.
Yeah. Driving to someone's house at 11 o'clock at night.
Right, and Ed Flynn came on, and we had other folks come on and talked about it. Julia Mejia, they came on and talked about this process. And really, this is the first time that I think any of us became aware of the process and the importance and the role of the president of the city council, even as it relates to positions and chairmanships, right?
Yeah, think of all the past presidents of the city council that has made it to mayor.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a significant impact there.
Sure.
Yeah.
So these things are happening in real time, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? And so it's so important that we have this kind of conversation consistently so that we can be responsive to these kinds of changes that are happening that we would not know otherwise.
Yeah. And think of all the people in the community that are dependent upon, like, they have a good relationship, right, with certain leadership when it comes to say there were people that the captains of these districts that got replaced, right? They could have had however they were with the community, maybe they, depending upon the level of engagement, and then you switch it up without any warning or notice or whatever it may be.
Right.
That has an impact there.
So
right? And then also when it comes to again, like we talk about how you have politicians, whether it be like Mayor Michelle Wu also as well, that came from a background where she didn't really have much of any, whether it be hardly much of a resume in terms of like government experience, let alone work experience, right, before running a city, right, an entire city. And then you've had where you've had her talk about wanting to have more representation and wanting to have people to have a voice, and then and having we're supposed to have an elected school committee. Now we don't, right? Things like that, where again and again, time and again.
No, absolutely. We're spending money on White Stadium when we're shutting schools. We're laying
how many millions of dollars is it now?
Right. Yeah, tens of millions. So Jamal, now that some of us are aware of these changes that they weren't asked of, where do you think we go from here? Do you think there'll be any backlash to this, or just be business as usual?
Well, I think specifically, I think the most affected will be the merchants in the Nubian Square area, and so I don't know what the plan for continuity and services is, because it's kind of like it was just getting, it had gotten better. It was kind of just getting stabilized, and although there are, some incidents here and there, it, had certainly gotten better. So I really think that the merchants in the area will be the first affected, and some of the residents, particularly the elderly. And I also too wonder about the coordination between the MBTA police with actual Nubian station.
Well, let me be honest with you with that too, because you bring up the MBTA police have a very good relationship with Captain Hussein. What they don't have is a relationship with the leadership in BPD, and that's really sad because the transit police impact our city probably more than any other agency as far as partnerships, right? They're literally have a station right in the middle of Nubian Square, and yet there's no real relationship and outreach from BPD's leadership with them, but they did have that relationship with the captain, and school police too, Larry, or whatever the iteration of it is now, because as you know, when Madison, O'Brien, and all that gets out,
and all those kids come down, and, you know, it's like the running of the bulls.
Yes. Well, that's the thing, the safety services.
Yeah, and then we talk about, right, we mentioned about how the deputy superintendent and superintendents are made by appointment, right? So they can come from any rank within the police department, right, and being appointed by the mayor. And I talked about Bureau of Field Services, which our listeners may not be aware of.
But didn't the mayor just take care of her guy that was the sergeant, the Asian sergeant?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Who was her chief of security.
One of her, yeah.
He was just promoted to deputy superintendent yesterday.
And another deputy superintendent, right? Currently we have deputy superintendent of Bureau of Field Services. We have Daniel Humphreys there. And you think about the people that she's appointing into these positions, where there's a situation with Humphreys where Will Knight, who was previously assigned to D14 with Humphreys, and then was assigned to special operations.
Got about a minute.
Yep. So Humphreys was known for wearing like all these stars and bars, like T-shirts and so forth. And Will Knight actually made a point of bringing it up to him that was an issue, right? Because him being from the South, that the T-shirt bothered him. He made the comment in front of 3 white officers, 1 black officer, right? And yet things like that don't go ignored, right? She's going to go promoting people that are known for being basically Confederate flag waving and what the stars and bars mean, right? And ignoring ignoring behaviors like that. And then you think of the way, even with the people that she appoints to these positions, you have to look at where the people that she decides to elevate, and that says a lot.
Well, there's no input from the community. Like I said, when I came on, that did not happen. What happened with Captain Hussein, these moves did not happen without our elected officials having some input, because they were going to see how it impacted our community. And here we are. So that's why I say we're no better here than we are under the Trump administration. We're no better here under this administration, not having any say in what happens in our community when they claim they're doing it for our betterment.
Yeah, and the fact that Wu's going to say that she's for the community, but yet it seems like she just rewards racist behavior.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got to leave it there. We have our guests have arrived at the top of the hour. Cora Holbrook and her team will be coming in. Folks, if you have any concerns or comments about real estate and mortgage loans, give us a call back here. You've been listening to At the Round Table with me. We'll take our break and we'll be right back.